Sarkicism is a religious/philosophical system that encompasses a variety of traditions, beliefs, and spiritual practices largely based on the teachings attributed to Grand Tarsis Ion, its deified founder. Some adherents practice ritual cannibalism, human sacrifice, corporal augmentation, thaumaturgy, dimensional manipulation, and the formation of pacts with otherworldly entities. Ordinate manipulation has allowed certain Sarkites to achieve anomalous states of being, transcending the physical limitations of baseline humans. Highly secretive, the general public appears to have little to no direct knowledge of their existence. Some organizations aware of them, such as the Global Occult Coalition or the Horizon Initiative, while the Church of the Broken God views them in apocalyptic terms. Though it hinders our investigation, their clandestine nature is ultimately beneficial to the preservation of normalcy. Disease is often viewed with reverence, and Sarkic shrines have been discovered with offerings of swollen lymph nodes and tumorous growths. Certain Sarkic cults treat contagions as concentration, a means to cull the weak, purify the masses, and thus seek actively to ensure their spread. Most but not all Sarkites play an inherent resistance to pathogens, though it remains unknown that this is an anomalous or naturally occurring attribute. Sarkic anomalies are not without risk to their users. While Sarkites are able to augment themselves into vastly superior forms, it has been shown that such alterations, or perhaps the secret truths that come along with running apotheosis, have a degenerative influence on mental stability. The exact cause of this remains unexplained, but it is most exemplified among known Tarsis, who frequently display symptoms of psychosis. The Foundation divides Sarkic cults into two distinct strands, Proto-Sarkic and Neo-Sarkic. Proto-Sarkic cults tend to be found in insular communities throughout Eurasia's most isolated regions. Its followers are genuinely self-reliant, humble, and apprehensive toward outsiders. Such groups commonly eschew modernity, occasionally displaying acute technophobia, and are bound by superstition and taboo. Desire for wealth and material possessions, and general selfless behavior are strongly frowned upon. In contrast, Neo-Sarkic cults are usually cosmopolitan, publicly embracing modernity and showing no apparent qualms with technology. Their public lives differing little from others of their culture and social status. Adherents are primarily affluent in families, rich in history and scandal. Both generally follow a single creed whose core beliefs include the following concepts. The belief that an individual can ascend to godhood. It appears that Sarkicism regards Grand Tarsis Ion, and to a lesser extent, his Clavigar, as a being who has undergone apotheosis. For the Proto-Sarkite, apotheosis will be achieved in time and only through Ion. For the Neo-Sarkite, it appears that if one has the ability to usurp Ion, it is their right, if not duty, to do so. The path to apotheosis is equal to the will to power. The will to power is the primary driving force of man. The individual seeks to master all things within its domain, exerting the direction of power, while other individuals do the same, often in opposition. Will is to power as a form of matter. In turn, desire is the measure of all things. The sacramental consumption of God. Sarkicism holds that there are many gods in the universe, none of which they worshipped, that these entities can be devoured in some fashion. Adherents ultimately believe that this parasitic relationship, whether literal or allegorical, is the primary source of their thaumaturgic abilities. Among Proto-Sarkics, it appears to manifest as the sacrifice of the self for the belief of many, that being sacrifice. Neo-Sarkic cults, in stark contrast, believe in the sacrifice of the many for the benefit of the individual. Muscle suffers damage only to heal and become stronger than before. The same can be said for the mind. We're developing toleration against the conventionally inconceivable things. Cycles of destruction and regeneration. Strife, according to Sarkicism, is the greatest of tutors. To shepherd the flesh. It is believed that all living things descend from a single progenitor, further explored in the mythology section. Adherents hold that this shared ancestry is a key to corporal augmentation, further suggesting a singular understanding of genetics, cloaked behind a layer of mysticism. It is the right of the Sarkite to guide in cultative organic matter. The most skilled flesh crafters are able to steal the genes of other life forms or create entirely new ones. Most Proto-Sarkic sects believe that Ion has achieved or is in the process of achieving apotheosis, and upon the completion of its metamorphosis will destroy this flawed, stillborn universe and remake it into a paradise known as the Etunan, where the many will at long last know salvation and joy beneath the rose-colored skies. There are, however, other sects that believe that Ion is dead, having martyred himself to protect humanity from the machinations of the gods. Neo-Sarkic cults notably diverge from this interpretation, regarding Ion with a certain amount of indifference. Their only concern is apotheosis, to become like the gods through the acquisition of power, development of skill, and the severing of ethical tethers that limit the potential of an individual. The Grand Tarsus is not viewed as a prophet or a messianic figure, but rather as an individual who became the closest to achieving godhood. They dismiss his moral teachings as weakness, ignoring much of the old scripture in favor of rituals they might exploit. While Neo-Sarkites and Proto-Sarkites share a common mythology and many of the same practices, it may be best to see them as distinct religions. To Proto-Sarkites, Neo-Sarkites are heretical, if not utterly profane, more an ideology, philosophy that has appropriated elements of the true faith. This renders Neo-Sarkites especially dangerous, as they lack the ethical and moral restraints common among the older traditions. There is evidence that Neo-Sarkites have gone so far as to make pacts with otherworldly beings, also known as Archons, that Ion once preached against. Sarkites are known to speak and write in the Adidite language. An introduction to Old Adidite is available here, which appears to be a syncretism of Proto-Uralic, a Indo-European, possibly Davite, and Greek. They're primarily Proto-Uralic. Practitioners of Sarkicism do not refer to themselves as Sarkit, the term a pejorative employed by the ancient Mechanites for their enemies, though their true name was adopted by the Global Occult Coalition and later by the Foundation as part of Project Citra Acra. In truth, Sarkic cultists often refer to themselves as Nalka, and under no circumstances are Foundation agents to use Sarkic or its derivatives when infiltrating related cults. Though adopting Mechanite terminology, the Foundation and GOC have unwittingly perpetuated the flesh-mechane cosmic narrative of the Church of the Broken God, which is an inaccurate and gross simplification of Sarkicism. While this document aims to recognize and correct the previous errors, Sarkic and its derivatives remain a normal part of the Foundation lexicon. Ultimately, it is feared that Foundation and GOC will only know a fraction of what Sarkicism entails and what its followers intend, based on available information. The speculated goals of Sarkic cults are nevertheless represent an SK-class dominance shift, and possibly of an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. It is important to understand that Sarkicism is not only a system of beliefs, but an ancient culture that has in secret preserved its own language, traditions, and societal norms, while outwardly adopting the dominant culture of the lands they inhabit. To comprehend Sarkic psychology, one must remember how their minds are shaped by their distinct social environment. Thus, behavior that would be considered beyond the pale to most might be perfectly acceptable among certain Sarkic cults. Letters between Neo-Sarkic cult members have been deciphered, revealing a fairly intricate caste system outside of religious hierarchy, functioning like a form of pedigree. It appears that Neo-Sarkites place heavy emphasis on bloodline, a hidden aristocracy whose marriage forms pacts in the foundation of powerful Sarkite families, referred to by followers as high-bloods, sometimes as black-bloods. One is generally born into Sarkicism, with new blood introduced to careful selection. It is difficult to draw a line between cult and family in Sarkicism. The recruitment of outsiders is usually unnecessary, as Sarkites have little trouble maintaining their numbers. Their virility and health apparently unaffected by generations of inbreeding. Even non-Tarsists and above, being biologically immortal, Sarkites have significantly lower rates of mortality when compared to that of the average human, rarely dying before reaching 100, unless by violence or accident. Though the common Sarkic hierarchy has remained relatively unchanged over the last 3,000 years, it is in no way universal. The two highest tiers, Osmirak, Grand Tarsist, and Clavigar, High Tarsist, has not been verified outside scripture and other documents, rendering it difficult to discern whether these ranks are truly a part of the modern Sarkic hierarchy or serve as a mythical foundation. With that said, the standard hierarchy from highest to lowest in terms of authority consists of Osmirak, also known as the Grand Tarsus, the highest tier reserved for the prophet Ion and no other. However, it is believed that there have been pretenders claiming to be the second coming of Ion. Ion himself is further discussed throughout the document. Clavadar. Names of 4 Clavadar are presently known, and they appear to have served a role similar to apostles. It is common for Neo-Sarkites to claim ancestry from a Clavadar, despite evidence against that possibility. See the hagiography subsection for history for information about individual Clavadar. Tarsists. The spiritual and secular leaders among Sarkic organizations. Tarsists are considered biologically immortal and vary in form and anomalous ability. It is theorized that they are able to control their Holocaust via the release of complex pheromones or even telepathy. Volutar, advisors to a Tarsis, predominantly found among proto-Sarkic cults, were synonymous with Wise One. Cosmology. The observable universe is among a finite or infinite number of possible universes contained within the meta-universe. Each universe can in turn be divided into a finite or infinite amount of iterations. The structure of the meta-universe and natural laws which allow for the manifestation of universes is eternal, without beginning or end. Universes, on the other hand, are created and eventually destroyed. Beyond this, Sarkic cosmology is fairly simple by virtue of the indifference of its adherents. Existence is regarded as entirely brute fact, corruptible, discordant, and devoid of purpose. The Old God. Yaldabaoth, also known as Vazjuma, God-Eater, Devourer, or his undulating vastness, the Great Winnower, the Womb of Chaos, and various other epithets, is regarded in Sarkicism as a principal power in the universe. Neo-Sarkites appear to admire this entity, but Proto-Sarkites and all discovered scripture thus far describe it as the true enemy of all people. Translated fragments of the Valzaron suggest that Ion had somehow usurped control of this cosmic entity, wearing the flesh of the Old God as some sort of armor and crafting from its body a kingdom. This is contradicted by recently discovered scripture, which suggests that Ion merely cast down the living gods of the Deva, which are avatars of the Archons, children servants of Yaldabaoth. The continued morality of humanity in the absence of paradise ultimately imply that, were Ion real, then he had failed to achieve his goals. As with all things related to Sarkicism, it is difficult to discern reality from myth, especially when myth contradicts. Proto-Sarkites view this entity with fear and disgust, regarding it as both the creator and destroyer of all life and the progenitor of gods. As more sets are discovered, the diversity of interpretation grows readily apparent. The wound cut from the flesh of totality, deep, severed the line of future and past. Drawn to its ancient fester, God swarmed as flies to a corpse. We waited with bloodless veins, faithful to that which we did not know, unable to imagine what we might become, their greater. Here we slept until our souls became flesh. Yaldabaoth is portrayed as both a destroyer and incidental creator, feeding upon gods, worlds, and stars, while exhaling life into the cosmos, which will evolve, grow, and eventually be harvested again. Life is thus a natural byproduct of the old god's existence, unguided by intelligence and spreading through a process not entirely dissimilar to panspermia. Sarkites believe this entity has turned the multiverse into an altar with our existence, and the existence of all biological life forms, being brought into our reality for the singular purpose of sacrifice. Blind and driven solely by instinct, Yaldabaoth is depicted as being accompanied by otherworldly entities known as Archons or Voltas among certain proto-Sarkic cults. These beings are described by Sarkic texts as faceless manifestations of primordial chaos. They are true forms inconceivable to the human mind. Gnostic and Mechanite scripture would mention the Archons as well, describing them as terrible and rapacious angels. The swineherd prostrated himself before the sorcerer king and asked, "Great sorcerer king and Osmarok, heart of man and light of lights, I speak for the folk of the cold marsh. We fear the red lanterns that dance without harmony. Our spirit drives warn of ill omens." And Ion did assure the man, "I have days upon the faceless winds. Serve its words of his undulating vastness. Their chief is blind, castrated by our words and will. He's seen signs of anarchy, but they will not come again. These terrible spirits do not deserve our love. Render them until no sacrifice until the stars have aligned." The 6 ordeals of Ion refers to 6 challenges issued to Ion by the Archons. Though ensuring their trials, Ion is said to have mastered the rituals and practices ubiquitous to Sarkicism, breaking free of the bondage of mortal limitations. Further information into Ion's relationship with the Autobots and his Archons, as well as the ordeals, remains unknown. Some Sarkic cults hold that the Archons, along with the Autobots, do not originate from our universe, let alone the multiverse. These cults believe that the entities begin in the void, and that their colossal physical bodies are vessels for profane spirits. Because their consciousness is tethered to the void, they know only hunger and will consume all things in their desire to feel whole, spreading like cancer across the multiverse. The Archons are frequently referenced as having some relationship to the stars and the growing darkness that exists between them, but little else is known about this connection. Sarkic art and iconography typically depicts Archons as red or black and vaguely cephalopodic. And to his flock, Ion thus spoke. I have stepped beyond the foe of dreams, stood before the old ones within their desolate domain. I have endured intolerable force across countless eons. I have seen the infinite dead worlds murdered by death herself. I have read the entrails of our Creator, beheld eternity unfurled. Know that our paradise draws near, and with our flesh shall we birth it. Most information regarding Sarkic history and mythology is sourced to the Bloodfell Codex, recovered from SCP-2480. The Codex includes a partial translation of the Valchazaran and the recovered marginalia. Along with archaeological evidence, the Foundation has been able to establish the historicity of Sarkicism. As essential as the Codex have been, large gaps remain in the timeline and much of the following is entirely speculative and subject to change. Early history. Sarkic weapons, armor, and trinkets have been discovered among Minoan ruins on the island of Santorini, formerly Thera, possibly placing their origins as at least before the eruption event which triggered the complex collapse of Minoan civilization around 1500 BCE. Davite tablets, dated approximately to 1800 BC, refer to a slave rebellion in the northernmost province, led by a charismatic heresiarch and half-blood. Scrolls are covered within contain phrases and terms archetypal to Sarkic cults, including references to Grand Karcist Ion. These findings suggest Sarkicism has existed for nearly 4,000 years. All evidence, linguistically and archaeologically, points to Western Siberia as Sarkicism's place of origin. Ion, if still alive, if ever have existed at all, likely represents a high-level reality bender. Little is known about the Grand Karcist, sorcerer obtained of Adetum, with all information being in the form of deification or humanization and lacking in factual reliability. The Valchazaran refers to Ion as having been born to a Davite mother and sired by a concubinous father, implying that males born of such unions were destined for slavery. The exact nature of Ion's bondage is unknown, but his supposed intellect suggests that he was not used for combat or manual labor, perhaps serving under an alchemist or priestess. Artistic depictions of Ion vary, ranging from masculine to androgynous, young to old, and from human to forms otherworldly. He is often characterized as wearing white, red, and black robes and bearing his iconic staff, whilst the nude variants depict his body as impaled by various spears or stakes carrying his own decapitated head, signifying his immunity to death. Associated symbols include spirals, shattered chains, drops of blood, sickles, and the Ouroboros. It remains unknown which came first, Ion's doctrine or his revolution. If these events are grounded in reality, it is possible that the religion developed in coincidence with his slave revolt, as a way to codify their means of anomalous warfare. In his mission, Ion was aided by 4 individuals known as the Clavigar, figures of reverence and supposed disciples of Ion. They are the saints of Sarkicism. Hagiography. Clavigar Nadox. Associated with intelligence, wisdom, perception, and mysteries. Epithets include tongueless speaker, horde of mysteries, the all-seeing, and the anticipation of Ion. Once a sage in the southernmost region of Davite influence, he preached a philosophy of peace and equality, building a following among the impoverished. Agitated in Deva, he was captured and publicly tortured, the poor he had tried to help now hurling stones at him. Before a crowd of hundreds, drunk and atrocious in their stupidity, a Deva priestess cut off his tongue, so shut his mouth, and had him emasculated. Rather than having Nadox executed, they instead had him marked, a symbol placed on his forehead, impossible to remove. It designated him as a sufferer. When people who were required by the Devas decree to forever torment but never kill. Nadox wandered the lands as pariah, denied refuge and safe passage, struck with rocks and slashed with knives, all by people who he had hoped to save. It is written that he beheld, while suffering from a fever dream, a messianic entity, one that could rescue him, and humanity from an existence of suffering and tears. Nadox would travel north in search of his savior to guide Ion towards his destiny. Nadox is typically depicted in red and gold attire, his head, sometimes hands, completely bandaged or caged by a punitive mask, representing his status as a sufferer, and bearing multiple arms and with eyes in the palms of hands. And symbols include eyes, hands, scrolls, teardrops, and lotus flowers. And Ion had 6 fingers aloft. Upon their spears did the soldiers impale themselves. "For you," they cried, before the blood drowned in their tongues. And Ion said, "Now do you see?" Nadox wept, as more did stupor themselves in Ion's name, for he had seen and now knew the truth of his words. Travador Lavatar, associated with sex, love, eroticism, pleasure, motherhood, disease, and unrestrained reproduction, breeding cancers, growth, etc. Epithets include the one whom Ion most desired, the high blood redeemer, and the mother, on rare occasions as brood or hive mother. A priestess, as well as the daughter of a Deva matriarch, she was initially in opposition to Ion, whose revolution would threaten her way of life. It is written that her hatred for Ion eventually became a sort of infatuation. Unable to remove him from her mind, she sought to capture and bind him as her consort. In her quest to make him hers, Levitar sent wave after wave of slave hunters, but none returned. In time, it would be Ion who came to her by his own accord. It is written that Ion visited her in the night, bypassing her guards, and appearing within her bedchamber. Instead of attacking, he sat on the edge of the bed and quietly spoke to her. What was said is unknown, but resulted in Levitar and Ion forming a union over the period of 12 days. On the 12th day, the two left her palace behind, never to return. Levitar is typically depicted as beautiful, voluptuous, often to unrealistic extremes, and almost always in the nude, save for golden ornaments, including headdresses, necklaces, and bangles. She is often stylized as having claw-like fingers or toes, as well as a pair of horns, which may or may not have been part of her headdress. Her symbols include an insect queen, traditionally a bee or ant, a punctured heart, a rose, and a broken scepter. Beneath the black moon, her devotion took the form of a stone knife. By those of the reindeer folk of Adi penetrated, amber blood colored by ancient sins poured from the wound, her tears like warm rain of distant summers. Beneath the poison moon, the amber flowed no more. In the snow, she painted red, indecipherable, for Ion, who drank deep of the mead and ecstasy. From Levitar's dark lips flowed words. There is pleasure in serving. Smiling, Ion fell to their knees, knowing the drunk joy of milk and sweet fermented honey. Travador Auroch, a figure of reverence and a supposed disciple of Ion, associated with strength, war, violence, wilderness, hunting and seemingly in contradiction, loyalty, and revolt. Epithets include the horned beast, brute lord, and the pale hunter, described as being of unnatural physical strength. Auroch was the product of an alchemical and thaumaturgical experimentation in slaves, enthralled to matriarch of Asvedosha, the ruling deva of the city of Gel. Auroch served as a personal guard and pit fighter. It is written that Ion, when taken to the city of Gel, entered the palace of matriarch Asvedosha, presumably the highest authority in the city. He requested that matriarch should leave and take with her a message to the Deva of Devas, lest she suffer retribution. Refusing his ultimatum, the matriarch ordered Auroch to destroy him. It is written that Auroch hesitated, his runes of bondage setting his starved soul aflame so that his body became spirit. Turned to his matriarch, he struck Asvedosha, fist imbued with the very power she had forced upon him, and reduced her body to cinder and ash in heavenly starlight. Auroch is typically depicted as having a large, muscular, cyclopic man wearing a loincloth. His symbols include a two-headed axe, a one-eyed skull, a hunting spear, fractured bones, a closed fist, and a bull elephant. As Auroch said to the Kytherians, "Power is made from pain of the fragile. Here, weakness dies. Here, strength is born. I exert myself, pale reflection of Ion's sacrifice of flesh to the intolerable force. and shift fertility is hushed. I commune with my Akuloth, or my sacred metamorphosis complete. Cavador Sarn. Figure of reverence and supposed disciple of Ion, associated with darkness, secrecy, deception, poison, assassination, or justice. Epithets include the Whisperer, the Coiled Shadow, the Faceless One, and the Judgment of Ion. A young house servant, she frequently endured Deva abuse throughout her life. Having suffered long enough, she calmly murdered the entire household with poison, garrote, and dagger. Captured, she would be imprisoned in the fortress city of Cursed. Sarn was awaiting execution when first approached by Ion, who moved through the dungeons by deep mist of summer's snowmelt. There he said, "The winds whispered of your actions. There is no evil in the judgment. You did not choose to be the vessel of your own will. Many will die this day, but you were needed alive." The prophet's hand is described as having transformed into a wolfish maw, tearing apart the cell door with its teeth and liberating Sarn. Honing her skills, Sarn would eventually control a network of spies and assassins. A Devite tablet describes her efficiency in graphic detail, including men and women disemboweled in the streets and Devite infants strangled in their cradles by traitorous servants. Sarn is typically depicted as either being a young girl dressed in rags or entirely a black half-human serpent being. Occasionally, both representations are shown, with the chimeric entity acting as a girl's shadow. Her symbols include serpents, a sacrificial dagger, a scale, and bound effigies. The heart is silenced before her dagger is seen, a moment immortalized in a single strike. A judgment, unavoidable, inescapable, dismay, a death inconceivable. To the arrogance of a Deva, triumph, a dagger in the darkness. With the blood of tyrants, our children will sleep well. There is little available information about Sarkicism between 1600 and 1200 BCE, despite this period being considered the golden age of Sarkic civilization. It is during this period that the Devite culture recedes. It existed only as a small city-state in what is now Mongolia. It is theorized the lack of archaeological evidence for its existence is due in part to many Sarkic structures being composed of living organic material. Or in the fall of the Deathless Empire, Sarkic civilization, having reached the zenith, began to spread into the Caucasus, Anatolia, Balkans, and part of the Levant and Mesopotamia. Impressed by, or fearful of, their anomalous capabilities, several tribal groups began to fight under the banner of Adi-Um and the Sarkic faith. These include the Castians, Proto-Thracians, Lycians, Illyrians, and many others. The semi-mythical state would come to refer to itself as Kamakakta, or the Deathless. The Hittite king Suppiluliuma II tried in vain to defeat the invaders, contributing to the fall of the Hittite Empire. The Kamakta Empire established a foothold in the Mediterranean, invading and colonizing the islands of Cyprus, Crete, and Gyros, It's uncertain as to who struck first, but a coalition of kingdoms was formed in response to a Sarkic threat, resulting in war around 12,000 BCE. Archaeological findings such as mass graves, weapons, terrain damage, and the primary source documents, such as scrolls recovered from the Darios in the Aral Sea, reveal the extreme and anomalous nature of the war. Foundation's historians estimate a death toll ranging from 20 to 30 million, making it the fourth most devastating war in recorded history. According to recovered documents, the coalition formed in response to the Kamakta Empire included the Egyptians, Mycenaean Greeks, Minoans, Canaanites, Assyrians, and Mechanites. Most details of the war are unknown to the Foundation. It is suspected that the deployment of colossi, such as SCP-2406, as well as the heavy use of a substance resembling Greek fire, that turned the tide of war against the Sarkites. When the war was over, the Kamakta Empire assumed destroyed along with Sarkic civilization. In reality, Sarkicism would continue in secret, as both its homeland in the Urals among the tribes that had fought under the banner of the Empire, such as the Thracians and Dacians. The damage to the region was great and many civilizations did not recover, resulting in the collapse of various kingdoms, the crisis of refugees, decline of art, script, literature, science, and technology, and the lingering disease and famine from these Sarkic biological weapons, an event later known to historians as the Late Bronze Age collapse. The fall of the once seemingly invincible Deathless Empire would result in a Sarkic diaspora, leading to the development of culturally distinct Sarkic cults throughout Eurasia. Due to a lack of reliable information, the Foundation can only speculate about Sarkic activities between 1100 BCE and 1300 BCE. The rise of Neo-Sarkicism. The majority of known Neo-Sarkic cults appear to descend from certain Carpathian noble families influenced by the Proto-Sarkic Solomonari. It is unknown whether the Solomonari intentionally infiltrated Carpathian courts, or if they instead sought out the nobles themselves, ignoring or dismissing, possibly embracing the rumors of devil worship and witchcraft surrounding the cult. Documents and artifacts retrieved from an SCP, which is not mentioned, suggest that some Solomonari served as court magicians, advising their lords and ladies on orders of alchemy, medicine, astrology, and occult. In the time, this would result in the development of Sarkic great houses, affluent families practicing their own interpretation of Sarkicism, placing the individual above the collective, and applying it to their own self-serving needs. This new strain of Sarkicism would spread throughout Europe via marriage. Once these footholds were established, great houses grew incestuous. Proto-Sarkicism. Individual orders vary by region but can be divided into two primary types, Proto-Sarkic and Neo-Sarkic. These do not appear to represent divergent beliefs so much as environmental adaptations. Practitioners of Proto-Sarkicism do not operate in the open unless a location is significantly isolated. Such sects display acute technophobia and eschew modernity, willing to go so far as to destroy or disable advanced electronics when encountered. Proto-Sarkic cults generally value humility and self-sacrifice. Known orders: the Solomonari. Ancestors of the Solomonari likely settled in the Carpathian Basin between 1200 to 600 BCE. It is presently hypothesized that the Sarkites assimilated into the local Proto-Thracian people, eventually becoming the Dacians. People recorded by ancient Greek and Roman sources. A Sarkic stronghold, since classified as SCP, was discovered in the southern Carpathians, is believed to have once been the heart of the Solomonari cult. It has been hypothesized that the Solomonari are related to, or one and the same, to the Dacian cult of Zalmoxis, having culturally notable with the ancient Proto-Thracian people. Documents discovered at SCP and SCP-2191 suggest the Solomonari remain highly influential, albeit secretive, until the 15th century, possibly having been destroyed by John Hunyadi, a leading Hungarian military and political figure. Several boyars of war of Wallachia and Moldavia, most notably the Dukalid clan of Hungarian nobles, are now believed to have been under control of Solomonari, an influence that would have led to the development of Neo-Sarkicism and its western expansion. It remains debatable whether modern practitioners should be more considered true Solomonari, while those discovered at SCP. Most are located in the isolated pockets throughout the Carpathians, with little to no connection with one another. The religion in its current state is an amalgam of local folk traditions and Solomonari blood rituals. The Church of the Red Harvest. Church of the Red Harvest were discovered at SCP-2133 in 1936 by GRU Division P. The Foundation became aware of the sect shortly after gaining control of SCP-2133 following the dissolution of the USSR. SCP-2133 is an unnamed village located in the northern Ural Mountains, whose denizens are only known members of the Church of the Red Harvest. The church practices a regeneration ritual that recent dead harvested as newborns from the turnip fields throughout SCP-2133. Members refer to the regenerative process as a part of an old covenant, one that cannot be broken and is to last until the return of paradise. It is currently believed that Church of the Red Harvest is directly controlled by a Karcist Alka, located in the subterranean dwelling beneath the nearby mountains, connected to the village by a series of tunnels accessible via the village church. The Vatula were initially mistaken for Akori, due to several superficially similar rituals. Known to the Foundation since 1969, Sarkic connection was only established in 2010 through extensive research. Vatula command fear and respect among the rural poor in the Indian states of Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu, and Kashmir. Haryana, Punjab, and Gujarat. They trace their origins back to Parsis Vasti, who claimed to have arrived from the northwest, granting them his blessing and spreading a virulent plague to their enemies. Church of the Eternal Mother. The Church of the Eternal Mother is a small sect found deep in the South Louisiana Bayou, represents what the oldest example of Sarkicism being transplanted to the North American continent. Practiced exclusively by members of the La Famille Natale, the rituals and practices of the church can trace their lineage as far as back as the fall of Darius or Tarsus Mestra. First contacted by the Foundation in April of 2010, the majority of the rituals and specific beliefs are still relatively unknown, and further research into the Natal family has been suspended following several recent setbacks. Neo-Sarkicism. Neo-Sarkicism displays only a superficial resemblance to historical and current pro-Sarkic sects. Whereas pro-Sarkicism is isolated and archaic, bound by superstition and taboo, Neo-Sarkicism embraces modernity, whereas pro-Sarkicism is fragmented, each group existing within a vacuum. Neo-Sarkicism is cosmopolitan and unified. It remains unknown whether Neo-Sarkic cults represent a relatively recent development or a willing evolution of proto-Sarkic cults. Neo-Sarkites display no qualms with technology and may be found in heavily populated locations. Their daily lives differ little from the others of their culture and social status. For Neo-Sarkic cults, the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own desires and the attainment of power. While some Neo-Sarkites prefer to cling on to their crumbling manners, relying on lands and titles, others have embraced modernity through capitalism. Known orders. Edem's Wake. Active throughout the northeastern United States, Edem's Wake is believed to be the oldest Sarkic organization in North America, with evidence of their existence dating as far back as 1650. The organization was presumably destroyed on November 28, 1952, but not before the creation of SCP-2480, considered by the founders of the project Sidra Arca to represent the first shots of what would become the complex and invisible conflict. Cornelius P. Bodfell, Tarsus, Sultist, a millionaire industrialist with an acute interest in the occult, was the acting leader of Edem's Wake until his death in 1952, dismissed by the Foundation in 1932 as merely a descendant social club. Their anomalous capabilities were not recognized until the November 28, 1952 incident. The Foundation fears that Edem's Wake survived in its initial defeat, and has theorized that the renewed cult, presumably under control of the Vivian Durant Croy, president and CEO of the Durant Bodfell Financial Group, wife of Hungarian national Alexander Croy, CEO of Abraxas Arms and a suspected Sarkite. The Hunter's Back Lodge. This is an anomalous criminal cult primarily active in the post-Soviet states, also known as the Black Lodge. They have been linked to extortion, murder, robbery, gambling, prostitution, and human trafficking, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, underground fighting rings. While these activities are not inherently anomalous, the anomalous capabilities of this group has had an aberrant effect on their presence. Foundation first came aware of the Black Lodge in the early 1990s after receiving informants from Interpol. Further investigation discovered the Black Lodge related documents from the recently dissolved GRE Division P, later corroborated by former members. It appears that GRE Division P was unable to fully contain or neutralize the threat presented by the Black Lodge. Clones were describing them as a Hydra. The organization got neutralized on several occasions, only for it to reappear months later, stronger than before. Victims of the Black Lodge have been discovered impaled, penetrated by large ordained spines, the descendants commonly showing evidence of ritual cannibalism. Esoteric Order of the White Worm. Active primarily throughout Europe, the Esoteric Order of the White Worm is a Sarkic cult disguised as an occult-themed fraternal organization. Similar to other secret societies, the existence of the cult is an open secret while its true nature is unknown to the general population. Based on documents recovered from the SCP archives, the Esoteric Order may be one of the earliest Neo-Sarkic sects, founded by Hungarian nobles heavily influenced by their Solomonari court magicians. The religion transformed into a hidden pagan faith to a secret tool of the landed gentry. Descendant of House Voros, a Hungarian noble family, are thought to dominate leadership and positions of the Esoteric Order. The Darkwater Lodge. Another more recent discovery has been the existence of the Darkwater Lodge. Located within the now closed nexus of La Rue Macabre outside New Orleans, LA. The Darkwater Lodge remains mostly unobserved. Negotiations to gain researcher access to the lodge via the Rue Macabre leadership is ongoing. What is known about them is that they represent one of the few examples of the Adida diaspora south into the greater part of northwestern Africa, transplanted to the North American continent sometime between the mid-16th century. The lodge brought with them a practice intermingled by extensively with the Akan peoples of Ghana. The creation and manipulation of living organisms through anomalous means represents the most immediate threat posed by Sarkicism. Enough patterns have been discovered among these organisms that they can be divided into different species. These organisms display no signs of fear or pain and regenerate injuries at an anomalous rate. Below is a partial list of such entities. ST Biotype 001. Colloquially referred to as behemoths by personnel, these entities are commonly over 4 meters tall, weighing approximately 7,000 kilos, with pale flabby skin, lacking visible eyes, ears, or noses. Their faces dominated by a large toothy mouth. First recorded instance of an ST Biotype 001 was SCP-2480-2. They appear to be of limited intelligence. ST Biotype 002. Generally 1.5 to 2 meters tall and weigh approximately 250 kilos. Mouths are vertical, running the length of what approximates a face. Spindly fingers and in 50 to 60 centimeter talons. Bodies are partially protected by white Chitinous tarparis, the flesh beneath dark red and visible at movable joints. ST Biotype 003. Also classified as SCP-2191-1, ST Biotype 003 are genetically human but have undergone several significant fatal mutations. ST Biotype 003 lack all major internal organs with the exception of the lungs, heart, and brainstem. The outer epidermis lacks pigmentation and displays a condition resembling that of cracked porcelain, possibly related to harlequin type ichthyosis. Entities appear to be androgynous, lacking or having somehow removed secondary sex characteristics, but regressed eyes are covered by a layer of skin, rendering them mostly blind but still able to react to light, universally displaying aversion to wavelengths more than 100 nanometers. Further deviations from baseline Homo sapiens include flat, upturned noses, funnel-shaped ears, both considered related to their dependency on olfactory and auditory perception. They do not appear to communicate via language. The only sound form being produced is a persistent clicking of the tongue, speculated to be a form of echolocation. ST Biotype 004. Colloquially referred to as snatchers by personnel, prehensile organic structures, dark red in color with a tentaculated shape. ST Biotype 004 are sedentary and are generally used by Sarkites to guard specific locations. ST Biotype 005. Known to Sarkites as T-Rock, instances of ST Biotype 005 are organic, biologically living structures used as temples. The Foundation presently has a decreased instance in containment, but other possibly living instances are theorized to exist across the world. Update. Living instances have been recently encountered by field agents. Further information is pending. ST Biotype 006. Known to Sarkites as Aculoth and his sacred white worm, instances of ST Biotype 006 are symbiotic organisms found in the bodies of both Sarkites and Sarkic organisms. It is believed that they act as secondary immune system, protecting the host against disease as well as greatly increasing their regenerative abilities. ST Biotype 006 is also believed to be in connection to the physical transformations some Sarkites undergo. ST Biotype 007. They may exist or be composed in multiple different species and generally refers to any ST biotype that lacks a stable physical form. All this can occur in many, if not all, Sarkic organisms if critically injured. Existing as a gelatinous mass, such organisms are able to increase their size with no limit by absorbing the biomass of those it encounters. An individual can be converted to an ST biotype 007 by ritual, as encountered when SCP-2075, causing transfiguration subsequent death of Dr. Albert Cronenberg.